to have, I think, a simple process at the end of the day. As far as SEO is concerned, it's a variation of Ahrefs' responsibility matrix. So you essentially have with that someone who can assist you with the research on any given topic, someone who is knowledgeable about the subject, who isn't the same person who does the research. How could he be? Someone who can write about the subject, and someone who will finally edit the final product.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SaaS SEO Show. I'm your host, George Galiotos, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Ilias Galiotos. Ilias is a marketing professional passionate about SEO, digital advertising, and lead gen. Ilias has successfully contributed to digital marketing efforts in both emerging startups and well-established brands. He's currently the Senior SEO and Paid Advertising Manager at MarineTraffic, powered by Kpler. And yes, I would like to welcome you at the show.
Thank you, George. Very happy to be here. It's an honor.
So, as we do with every guest here at the show, like a little tradition we have, can you please share a few things about you and your journey so far, so that we can have context as to like who you are today and what you do at MarineTraffic?
Sure thing. I've watched every episode, so I know the intro was coming. As of late, I've been in the demand generation capacity here at Kpler, who has acquired MarineTraffic. I've been in this position for the past 4 years. Before that, I was again in the demand generation capacity at the cybersecurity company ESET. All in all, I've been in marketing for 10 years in the demand generation capacity. SEO is my preferred tool, but I also tackle advertising, and I've also done a couple of projects that ultimately have helped me towards this. That's an intro of the satisfactory.
10 years, so you must have seen like a lot of changes so far, and I don't know what your thoughts are about the recent changes like with AI and Google and so on, but we will discuss about all this. Before we move forward with some of the questions I've prepared for today's episode, for people who haven't heard of MarineTraffic and Kpler before, can you please give us just a quick overview of what MarineTraffic is, maybe who is the typical customer and who gets the most value out of its products?
Yeah, sure thing. MarineTraffic is a maritime analytics provider, the leading maritime analytics provider. We provide the maritime data to a wide range of professionals, such as supply chain professionals, vessel owners, vessel operators, and fleet managers, port authorities, governments, and so on and so forth. Essentially, most maritime professionals have a case to use a tool such as ours. They make more informed decisions, and then we can help them get more visibility, whether they want to track the shipment, the vessel, whatever it is that they may do.
That's not your typical. That's not your typical. That doesn't sound like your typical, SaaS. Like when we hear SaaS, when we think about SaaS, we think about like MailChimp or HubSpot or anything like that. But this is, as I hear it, it's very niche and very like specifically tailored to a specific, target audience, right?
If not audience, an industry, the maritime industry, which is a bit more traditional, I would say. Yes, our tool isn't as viral as the ones you mentioned, but in this space, it has a lot of traffic. And as you can imagine, everyone involved in it generates a lot of traffic, but not everyone is a maritime professional. So we get hundreds of millions of users every year. But the secret as to every freemium product-led software as a service is to convert this to a paying customer, know him better than the average user, and have different case studies, workflows, situations for both. What we essentially do is we group these people to two personas. The one is the supply chain professionals, the people who are interested in tracking their cargo. So they use our system to do that, either to a container or the vessel carrying the container itself. So this is category number one. And we have a different category number 2, and for the ones operating the vessel or a collection of vessels, the fleet, and the ones who own this fleet, who are interested in maintaining it, finding its safest route, checking out how much carbon they are emitting, and other things of that nature. So we group them thusly, and everything else, if it's not a paid user, we might be more interested perhaps in our map or some other rudimentary metric which we can provide.
Okay, so we have two core segments. From like go-to-market standpoint, since you have these two core target audiences segments, I mean, how do you treat them in terms of like strategy that appeals to each segment, and like how big the difference is? I mean, reaching the first group versus reaching the second group.
Well, there, as you might expect, firstly, they have, I guess, different pain points. So aside from the map, which is a great acquisition tool from an organic standpoint, we do want to address those pain points separately. As I mentioned, you will find the person who owns the fleet has very different things to consider than the person who owns the cargo and renting this fleet for XYZ trip. So they have different needs, they have different pain points, but they use the same data set, if it makes sense, as to address it in a different part of the site. So as you might expect, the branding is a bit different, the messaging is a bit different, tailored to this need, and it all gets fueled by first-party data. So we keep interviewing these people, asking them to fine-tune, rate our services, and we change things accordingly. So I would say they view quite different environments, but they get the same tailored experience at the end of the day, under the same brand.
I mean, if you think about, people who may build products, that you can find them on like Twitter or Reddit or Product Hunt. If you think about salespeople, and marketing people, you can find them on LinkedIn and so on. Where can you find those folks online? I guess you can, obviously. Otherwise, there would be no reason to do any like online, broadly referred to as online, marketing to reach those audiences. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And like, where do you think you can find these folks online, so that you can then like, I don't want to use the word funnel them, but like lead them to your website?
Yeah, for lack of a better word, you're right. First of all, it's interesting to point out that because it is a traditional industry, offline still works, and online can support offline in the sense that you can support events, do and post publicity support and whatnot. So events are still pivotal, and we do support them. They do congregate offline, and it's important to have a good brand and attend these shows. You don't necessarily follow them, but if they do make your acquaintance, it's just another part of the dark funnel, and we just have to get used to it. We see the after effects later when we ask them to sign. They tick the appropriate box, so we know this box ultimately as well as you can track offline. But that aside, they use specific news sites that are very niche specific, not more than a handful ultimately. A handful has the biggest chunk of traffic, as it is normal with those niche industries. Social media groups, different ones at that, but essentially social media groups, LinkedIn groups, Reddit work for us, even the traditional forums, as you might expect, especially for crewing and a couple of other subcategories that are still on the site.
Is Google search part of the journey? And do these folks use like traditional review sites like G2, Kpler, and so on as part of the journey?
I think they do. We actually have evidence to support that, but we haven't done the best of work into finding that and syncing between the two. MarineTraffic is primarily known as a vessel tracking map operator. So, and these people are more in the charge of that we previously described as other supply chain professional or vessel owner. But we're currently changing that. We're submitting ourselves reacquainting everyone with the brand in these categories. I don't think we really use it, but as they are very traditional, but you want that in the sense that you want to be in the correct market.
That makes sense. I would like to shift gears a bit and discuss content and content strategy specifically. Now, one of the things you do as part of your demand generation strategy is content, right? And I would like to ask, what are the main pillars or how you approach your content strategy at MarineTraffic and Kpler?
It's, I would say, tailored to the specific brand, obviously influenced by the very useful resources that you and I are both acquainted with. The uniqueness of the situation is that this site has, and will always have, because it was there first, a lot of free traffic that pertains to the vessels and ports of the world. So this will always be there. Having said that, you can make a free account at this moment, and you will be funneled, for lack of a better word, to a paid option through the product use. So it's product-led SEO, I think, ultimately tailored a bit to reflect the uniqueness of the maritime industry. What we essentially do is we divide things depending on the vertical. So I did mention that this in branding, the vertical, and also the curation that is heavily introduced in both. So the same content is essentially broken down into pieces. So any vert can be used as a blog spot, or at least its transcript can. Snippets of it can go to social. The client in question can then become the subject of a case study, which is a typical content curation checklist. And also I would say, it might be self-explanatory, but obviously it is content for the rest of the funnel as well. So a webinar can be used, as I mentioned, multi-purposely, and ultimately through some sort of lead scoring system that I'm sure most of us still use if they haven't switched to an ABM platform already, which we're also examining. Combination with lead scoring to see which leads can be further down the pipeline, so that organic also helps in acquiring these people. So this content strategy helps our sales strategy. This is the content that is used even directly in the sales calls further on, if it's appropriate. So personalized content for both chunks, for both personas, and content throughout the funnel to assist in lead scoring and lead generation.
Isn't it difficult to find people who can talk about maritime analytics or vessel tracking, container tracking, and all these things and topics that you have to cover as part of your content strategy? I mean, as I understand it, there has to be some sort of knowledge and expertise around the topics that the writer is going to write about, and at the same time being, I don't know, up to date so that the piece doesn't doesn't read boring, right? And it's engaging for the reader.
Oh, definitely. It is challenging indeed, but we have, I think, a simple process at the end of the day. As far as SEO is concerned, it's a variation of Ahrefs' responsibility matrix. So you essentially have with that someone who can assist you with the research on any given topic, someone who is knowledgeable about the subject, who isn't the same person who does the research. How could he be? Someone who can write about the subject, and someone who will finally edit the final product. And this works for us in the sense that we have a lot of knowledge of people in the company. I hope I'm doing their work justice, as you can understand, because it's not a singular effort. So they're the ones who will extract the data points that are, for example, relevant for a topic. They're the ones who make sure that we have a high degree of confidence in this data set. And they will be the ones who will explain it to the layman. And the layman being the final reader, even though they might be a maritime professional themselves. So we want to push something out there that we know is true. And the writer has, essentially, the writer in this particular scenario is bypassed. And the only thing you have to then do is edit according to your brand guidelines, which is something, again, that our in-house team is very good at. So because we have the in-house team, because we have the data, the writers and the editors, we follow a simple linear process, slightly variated when compared to HFSs, as I previously mentioned, and we can essentially be sure that what we're posting is correct.
Okay, that makes sense. One thing that you mentioned earlier, like when I asked about where can you find your target audience, these two segments online, you mentioned like the fact that there are some media outlets and like news websites where I guess most or many of these people spend time online reading news. One thing that's interesting about your industry is the fact that often, and unfortunately not for a good reason, there are certain news that break, or vessels that went missing, accidents, and so on. My question is, how do you handle these incidents, considering that you bear the responsibility of data accuracy and factual information, and that many of these news websites may rely on MarineTraffic and Kpler data to, write a piece of content about something that happened somewhere in the world?
That is indeed the case. The analogy that I like to use here is that of the weather report. So imagine if you have the weather report that gives you a forecast, and then you take appropriate actions according to the data. But obviously, this data is shared everywhere, and everyone can do what they think is most relevant. So in a way, we don't handle the accidents ourselves. If you notice, even though we have a great coverage pertaining to the accidents, we don't actually cover them. We don't quote on them. There is no MarineTraffic or Kpler spokesperson. I don't think there ever will be who will comment on any particular incident. But what we can do is provide accurate data, which in the context of the accident become YM, YL pages, I guess, for lack of a better word, in Google's eyes. And even though they use some of the rankings when this is newsworthy, they maintain the high rankings there as something you can trust data-wise. There is no storytelling behind those pages. They insert via JavaScript the most latest data with a high degree of confidence. So there is no story there or anything of the sort when it pertains to an incident. It's just the right information that happens to mirror the situation. So, for example, if something happens on someone in, let's say, a boat has an accident, you could see the help sinking together to go help the boat or something like that. So it is just like the analogy of the weather report. We give out the weather report and everyone can use it as they see fit. We don't actually, we don't advertise, obviously, in such instances. We don't use it in our narrative. We're just happy to support and help when there's trouble, I guess. You mute the jet, sorry.
That makes sense. However, I wanted to ask about cases where people use MarineTraffic data, right? And I guess that happens quite a lot. How do you ensure that in these cases, and it may be a media publication or a news site or whatever that used and referenced MarineTraffic's data, how do you ensure that all these publications and websites reference MarineTraffic in the right way? I mean, are there cases where you have to reach out and say that, guys, here you use our data, but you haven't inserted the link back to our website, to that relevant page or whatever? Or is it just, it happens so much at such a scale that you can't control it and do something about it?
That's indeed true. It does happen at a true scale. Now we go beyond the niche sites, beyond the maritime industry-specific sites. We have been featured across the board. There is a dedicated team for it in-house, which is doing a spectacular job. They break bread with CNN, Fox News, the New York Times, every publication under the sun. Our backlink, we have 700 million backlinks for the last quarter, the last time I checked it. So this definitely happens a lot. This is also part of the model because we allow a lot of this information for free. You can have an account and check it out. But as it happens, when it comes to leveraging news, this we can influence to a degree. So being up the dedicated team, we have guidelines from an SEO perspective, including the nuances that you'd want covered, such as the anchor text or perhaps a UTM to track some traffic. This can become the basis of a conversation later on also, as we tend to collaborate with a couple of news outlets, depending on how they use their data and if we like the way they report things. Obviously, we're not into sensationalizing things. So again, you will find no quotations or nothing of the sort indicating MarineTraffic having to do with this. But we do make sure that we give them the same data that we would if we were an original article. So our data team makes sure that we have a very high degree of confidence in this data set. And what it says is factual. And from there on out, the publications is data to use as they see fit.
Okay, that makes sense. In the same topic, I want to discuss something that I would like to hear your thoughts and get more information on, which is the fact that many websites can integrate or embed your vessel map into their own website. First of all, is that right? Is that correct? And if so, can you talk about that a bit?
Such is the case for us. Yes, indeed. It's a win-win situation. We've done it since day one. We essentially allow limited access to users using the map in an embedded form via another site. It's very popular with travel blogs, with maritime blogs, with local news sites, everyone really. It's essentially a win-win situation. We get more visibility, we become the trusted source thusly, and they get to have access to data that is most relevant to them, really. So, for example, you can imagine a lot of Piraeus local ports or blogs, for example, they just use the Piraeus view. They view Piraeus via MarineTraffic in an embedded map. It's a win-win. They cover locally the page, when we get the trust signals back. As an example.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. By any standard, MarineTraffic's website is huge in terms of traffic, right? At least according to Ahrefs. How do you separate the signal from the noise for such a big website, and really focus on getting and maintaining visibility for the terms that matter and can have a business impact?
Well, that is indeed interesting. Something we always try to fine-tune, obviously. As I did mention, there's a lot of freemium traffic on the site. We have millions, dozens of millions of visitors, only a percentile of whom are to become our final customers. Only even fewer of them are our ideal customer. So we want to grow exponentially. So this is something we always work on. I would say a very important distinction is whether or not the user is a professional user of the platform or not. Obviously, if he isn't, there's no need to bombard him with email sequences. There's no need to have him in any marketing list or everything of the sort. He can be excluded from all of this. He can keep enjoying the program. That's how essentially it was built, so that's fine. And secondly, again, with the user, with the data that the user would give us to what vertical he belongs, we cover the two main chunks, the different experience that everyone gets. Obviously, this is generated from the user. So if we know that you are a supply chain professional, we can obviously give you a better experience. We can point you to the proper direction on the site. We can onboard you. And this ultimately helps you also. And ultimately, lead scoring, I say, combines the two in a nice way. You want the people who are qualified enough to talk with your representatives to be able to do so. You want to create a pipeline for those people. You want to fine-tune this in synergy with what we've previously discussed, all the ways that we generate all the streaming traffic. You want all of this to work harmoniously, if it's possible. So those are things that I think are the most important things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lead scoring. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know, lead scoring is kind of, it's one of these things that you get to hear very often, but it's one of these things that I wonder, like many companies refer to it, but is it really easy to do it right? Because especially we're talking about like really high volumes. How can you be sure that like this is the right person to pass on to my sales team and so on? I don't know if you have any insights on that, but I'm just wondering, and it's one of these nuances that I always wonder, like, is anyone doing this really well and have really nailed it?
I don't know. I think everyone changes it according to the goals. I don't think it's something set in stone. I think it takes a lot of cross-functional effort to nail it. And I think that a lot of people are switching to EPA if they haven't already, which is something we're also exploring. And a combination of the two, plus any other channel or tactic that might come up on that end, is what's needed. As is the feedback of the salespeople who ultimately you want to help. And this is out of your area. So obviously their input is very, very, very important.
Yeah, obviously you get feedback from them and adjust your like demand gen activities accordingly, right? At the end of the day, they will tell you whether the leads that come their way are high quality or not.
Or not, exactly. And this might hinder your goals, especially if you are the demand generation capacity. You want to prove that you can own the pipeline, but the pipeline that doesn't convert doesn't make any sense. In a freemium site with millions of users, these nuances become the problems that you always fine-tune, essentially. I don't think this will ever stop. IP, I forgot to mention that IP identification tools are also useful in this.
Yes, that's right. I mean, we are using it as well. We are using one as well, and we tried a couple ones before that. But of course, our case is different because we are talking about lower volumes, right? You just need to identify a handful of companies every week, and then like find a way to connect with these companies and so on.
Keep outreaching to them, yeah.
Yeah. On something completely different now, what are your thoughts on AI? And have you found any like use cases for your workflows and like the tasks you are working on at MarineTraffic and Kpler?
So generative AI, you mean?
Yes. More broadly, yes. We can talk about FD as well, but let's start with generative AI. That's right.
I won't have a lot to say about SGA as I'm not. I haven't checked it out yet. I must admit I'm late to this party. But given the fact that it's only available to the US and there's a traffic from the US, so it interests me. But I'm not still up to date on this. But overall, as far as OpenAI's suite of tools is concerned, I actually am very impressed. I'm happy. This has boosted my productivity. So as a marketer, I love it. I use it in briefings. I use it in ideation. I use it for budgeting. This has been helpful across the board. Overall, I'm a bit worried. Like I see, as you can see, the occasional story that makes you think that this is a dystopia. But at the high level, I think this has been very, very, very helpful across the board, even beyond the generative AI. So I'm a bit unsure. I certainly want it to be more regulated, and I think, but I am interested in the capabilities.
Okay, that makes sense. One question I ask very often when we are, nearing the end of an episode is the future, right? And how things may look like in the future, because people, I guess, we want to very often talk about the future and think about it. So I will ask you the same question, and I will ask you, what do you think the future holds for niche SaaS companies like MarineTraffic that have great tech behind them, obviously, and have a very specific, target audience? What do you think the future looks like for these companies when it comes to demand generation?
I would say remote first, international setting. The only constraint now would be the time zone, surely for all these companies at this point, which is good also for the talent pool. And first data driven by first-party data, so exporting these things from everywhere, creating a data lake, something in-house, and having ownership of their data, blocking the various AI agents that will come up, having ownership of their data first and foremost. But having said that, develop in-house uses for AI. So as I mentioned, operations-wise, ideation-wise, planning, reporting, budgeting, I see it being a lot more readily available. There will probably be viral tools that we now use for email, not that will pertain to that. Already they can read PDFs, find the statistical anomalies in sharing reports from Salesforce. All these goodies would become, I think, more common knowledge as we go from early adopter to general population. I think that's a given, that's not a prophecy. And since I see budgets tightening and whatnot, I would also say gaining a bit more visibility from other departments. I can see it now. Kpler has been acquiring at a tremendous rate companies across the board. And while they have been data-driven, sales-driven, product-led-driven, they don't really have the demand generation capabilities that we have. So I think more specific boundaries and getting bigger, cutting things off, for example, from others to incorporate to them, responsibilities-wise at least.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think the role is growing. Like I've been watching the role also just for trends as I say, to establish a baseline. I can see more jobs that pertain to demand generation that are better defined than they were 5 years ago. People understand, I think, much better what it exactly means at this point.
Hopefully, because right now there is some turbulence, especially in the content and SEO, especially in the SEO world. But content marketing also is under a crisis right now, identity crisis, because I think that content marketing can come out of this stronger, but the game has to be redefined for that to happen. SEO, I don't know, I can't really speak about SEO because, we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see how big, the impact will be. It may not be, which at the end of the day, like changes have happened in the past. Yes, there is impact, but at the same time, there are more people who use like the internet and search. And so I don't know, I can't speak about that, but I want to believe that we will come out stronger out of all this and that there will be both in-house jobs and like agencies that serve the SaaS industry moving forward.
Well, I agree. Certainly, I agree.
Yeah.
I share your optimism also.
Yes, I don't know. I guess I have to be optimist, right? But
I hope so. I hope it doesn't change a lot. Like, but again, you see the position that we are now. You see some all the black hat gurus talking about text injection and stuff. So, and you say, this works still, or has, and it's interesting. It refers back to an era. It would seem that has long passed. It's good that we can always change things. Like I'm taking the generative AI intro. I don't think this will make me a better handler of FG, but if things are to change, we ought to be ready. And from the various quotes that I see from from the top voices at Google, that's probably something we won't avoid. But I'm sharing the optimism also. I don't see it changing in the immediate future. But if it's refined for the better, because the collective people say so, and it's a better user experience, search experience, that's all we need for. So we'll be going through that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this was a very insightful conversation. Last question I have for you, Ilias, would be where can people find out more and get in touch with you if they'd like to?
LinkedIn. Everyone can hit me up on LinkedIn, just as long as you don't send me backlinks, folks. And I can be friendly to everyone.
Everyone gets those. Okay, so we will drop your LinkedIn profile URL in the show notes. And I would like to thank you very much for joining us and for finding the time to do this.
Thank you, George. Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you so much.